What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My guest today is a health and wellness coach that has a really unique perspective on the way she handles her practice. She has actually healed herself from issues such as chronic pain, depression, anxiety, ADHD, and the like. And she's done it all by using things like yoga, mind-body medicine, and things of that nature. This was a truly inspiring conversation that I had with her. I could have kept on talking with her for hours. So I hope you guys enjoy the show. Please welcome Anna Nyeste. Anna, welcome to the Jacked Up podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. You and I have a very, very unique thing in common in that we believe that the overall well-being of an individual encompasses much more than just the traditional things. So with that being said, why don't you let my audience know how you got started in doing what it is that you do now, helping people, realize some of these things that you and I already know.
Yeah, it has been a long and painful road, honestly. But I think that's kind of the case for most people. These ideas that we get that end up making the biggest difference tend to be those that go against what we have been told or what other people say is going to be the easy road. And while you're in it, where I was, for instance, about 3.5 years of undiagnosed chronic pain and illness, not able to get any answers and just continually feeling more frustrated and alone and isolated. But that ended up being the thing that led me to where I am today, which is that understanding of this holistic nature of healing ourselves, and that health has so much more to do with the food we put into our body and the exercise that we're doing or not doing. Those are very important components and important to understand. But if you're not truly understanding who you are as a person and what your body, your mind, your soul really responds to, either positively or negatively, you can try and do everything and replicate all of the success that other people have had, and you're constantly going to be coming up against that wall and more obstacles and more pain. So for me, I had to go through that to really understand that it was time to stop doing the things that everybody said I was supposed to do and start listening to that voice inside that was telling me to do it completely differently, regardless of how crazy it sounded or how non-traditional it might be. And if it was covered by insurance and these things that you tend to take into consideration with health, rather than thinking about, okay, who am I at my core? And what is it that feels like the right thing to do right now? And if I just tried doing that with no expectation of results, what might come of it? And then the more I did that, the more I experimented with certain things and opened my mind to other things that really, it wasn't even that I hadn't considered them. I didn't know a lot of them even existed. And so just that process of getting really curious and discovering all of these paths and avenues that were available that I never even knew I had access to, it gave me this kind of motivation and drive to keep going out there and seeing what else might be there that I didn't previously consider. And could that be something that ultimately helps me? And if so, is that something that maybe I could help other people become aware of, because maybe it could help them as well? So it has been this kind of trial and error, but also just self-discovery, I think, is the number one key, is what I'm realizing, to understanding who you are and how you can get to the life that you know you were always meant to live.
Yeah. That is so true. The more I do these podcast episodes and the different people that I interact with, it is so amazing how everybody there seems to be one common theme within everybody that I talk to. And it's all about mindfulness and mindset. I think that the power of these two terms, you hear them a lot more prevalently today, but the power that's behind them, people really don't understand until they're in a situation where they harness that power and are actually able to use it to affect change in their life. And I've also noticed that a lot of people like yourself, like me, and so many others that I've talked to, people that are in the business of helping other people, usually are doing it because they've been there, they've done that, they've walked the walk, and it's like they've had to hit all the potholes in the road, and now that they've learned the better way to do things, they want to share that with others. And I really think that it's amazing how that people going through trials like that actually, how that affects them in that way. And now in your case, you cured yourself from, the chronic pain, from depression, from anxiety, from ADHD. What were some of the things and tools that you utilized yourself to get over some of those obstacles?
Yeah, it was a really, there's a million of them. And I think that is really important for people to understand, is there's never going to be just one thing that you're going to be able to go out there and say, oh, that was the thing that changed it all. That was the missing piece. But it's this process of collecting all of those pieces and continually trying to figure out where you put them in the puzzle until something clicks, until you can see the whole picture. And I love that you brought up the mindfulness aspect, because I think that's another misconception that people have, is that while mindfulness is becoming trendier and people are really starting to see it as a more mainstream option, and it's not just about, this Zen meditation and spending all your time just zoning out. It's really, it's about understanding that it is not about turning your brain off. It's not about not having thoughts. That's impossible. Your brain is going to constantly make calculations and produce thoughts. It's what it's supposed to do. That's a good thing that it's doing that. However, it's the separation from the thoughts themselves, understanding that you're not the one creating those. That is your brain's job, to create these thoughts and to make connections in certain areas. And when we identify it as we are the ones creating it, then we think, oh, well, if I have this awful thought that feels super uncomfortable and I'm the one that thought it, that must mean that I'm an awful person. But it's that creating the separation. And it's funny, I had this conversation with my husband yesterday where I'm in this place where I'm recognizing that I'm making a distinction between my mind and my brain, where your brain is an organ. It is meant to, constantly be churning and coming up with thoughts and understanding all of the sensations and the different things that are coming into your perception and making sense of it. However, your mind encompasses so much more. And that's really where that consciousness aspect comes in. But it's also how it relates to your body and yourself, which has nothing to do with your ego and everything to do with why you were put here. What really connects with your inner being, rather than the things that you've collected throughout your life, that you now have all these beliefs about yourself and you're identifying with them because you're trying to make sense of something. So, for instance, you mentioned ADHD. And it's not as though I necessarily consider I've healed from ADHD. I just have a much better understanding of what that is. It's, again, once I really got into kind of picking it apart, understanding that these things that have happened to me my whole life, that I saw myself as very different and as things being harder for me than they were for other people, I now had this way to explain it to myself to make me feel better. But then what it ended up happening is I began identifying with that diagnosis, where now, oh, I can't do these things because I have ADHD, and it's always going to be harder for me than it is for a neurotypical person. And so as soon as I started questioning that belief and thinking, well, if I'm constantly telling myself my life is going to be harder than everybody else's, where is that motivation to go out and keep trying to find ways to make it work? Versus maybe I can start thinking about this differently and say, okay, I understand that that's something that has affected me for a long time, but I also know from my own research and experience that I have the ability to change my brain chemistry through different methods of whether it's medication, meditation, diet, exercise. We know from a scientific level that we can change those neural pathways. So let me try doing something different rather than just accepting that this is what's going to be my reality for the rest of my life. And so that is what mindfulness is to me, is really getting to understand how much control we actually have over the things that are going on in our brains and our body, instead of focusing on the external circumstances that we don't have any control over. And we continue to try to control and then get frustrated and angry when we can't do what we want to do, because that's what life is. You know, we have no ability to predict what's going to happen or prevent it from happening.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like Tony Robbins says, the brain is a 2 million-year-old piece of hardware that is designed to create us. It's designed to make us survive. It's not designed to make us comfortable. It's not designed to make us thrive. It's not designed to do all those other things. It's just designed for survival. So, but it is something that we can harness the power of. We have the ability to control our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, all these things. When you talk about emotions, for example, they say one of the best way to change your emotions is with motion. Get up, move, do something. If you're feeling depressed or something like that, go take a walk or take a jog or ride a bike or do something like that. Because, they say that there's a reason that the word motion is in emotion. It's because they're directly connected. And a lot of people miss that connection.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. And I actually have right next to me, Tony Robbins' book here, Awaken the Giant Within, which is absolutely life-changing. And I recommend to anybody that may be even a little bit curious about how we can start making tiny little changes. They don't have to be these huge lifestyle changes that you make all at once. But what you find is when you start making those really difficult changes, which are the ones of saying, just because I've believed something my whole life doesn't mean that I need to go on believing that same thing. That's when you're going to see those huge changes in your life. And the whole idea of, we know that exercise helps with anxiety and depression and so many other health problems. But I think where people kind of, where we're coming up against a plateau where people start making these changes and then they hit that point where they're like, okay, I did all these things, I got some progress, and now I can't get any farther. It's because you just took that at face value and you didn't start going even deeper than that to say, okay, yes, I know that when I exercise, I feel better. But now let me start asking the questions of why. And also, why did I not feel good to begin with? Instead of thinking it as a fix, you're realizing that's just one of those things you have control over that you didn't realize you did. But now you have to continue to come up with those questions that are going to allow you to get to the root cause. And that, I think, is the number one thing that I hope people can understand about health, is that everything that you experience in your life is a symptom of a cause. And if you're constantly going out and you're only trying to find ways to address the symptoms so you can make it go away because it's uncomfortable and you don't want to feel that way, it's going to show up in another area. It's like whack-a-mole. It's like you find that thing to make the symptom go away over here, but because you didn't address the thing that caused it to begin with, it's going to pop up in another area, and you're going to think it's totally unrelated. But those two things are stemming from the same issue. And once you can really get to that inner reason of what is making these things show up consistently in your life, that's when you're going to find real change and real healing.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I look at it, I've never used the term whack-a-mole before, but I really like that. What I like to do is, like, cause I talk a lot about the diet industry and how it's so basically just pumped full of shit. There's no two ways to cut around it. It's all designed to keep you hooked, keep you coming back so you can continue to spend money. But when you look at a diet, for example, if you give somebody a diet is something that starts and stops. It doesn't do anything to treat the underlying symptoms that got the person in the position to begin with. It's like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. That's what I like to say, because the Band-Aid doesn't do a damn thing for cancer. The only thing it does is, if you've got a sore, it might cover up that sore and let that sore heal, but it didn't solve the problem at all. And that's what I like it too. And I thought it was so cool that you used the whack-a-mole reference. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and well, and I love coming up with metaphors in my life, because it makes
Mhm.
these things that feel so personal and like we are so deeply in it, and it's insurmountable.
Mhm.
It's like Tony Robbins says, he talks about something called transformational vocabulary, which I
Mhm.
realized I had already been doing in my life. I just didn't have really a name for it. And language is so important. And we don't
Yes.
understand how much it actually affects the way that we think, the beliefs that we're creating. And so, for instance,
Mhm.
that word diet, people are always saying, like, I'm on a diet. And to them, that means, oh, I'm making healthier decisions. I'm putting better things in my body. But really, everybody is on a diet. A diet is simply the
Mhm.
food and substance that you're putting in your body. So when you're
Right.
telling yourself, I'm on a diet, that to you is saying, oh, I'm making this massive change in my life. But really, all you've done is change the actual food that you're putting in without
Mhm.
understanding that that's just one thing that you have control over that can make you
Right.
feel better. And so
Mhm.
instead of letting that be the only thing, and then you get to that point where you feel much better, and then all of a sudden, either you slip backwards or you plateau or something doesn't work anymore. And then you're like, well, I don't understand. I made all these changes and I'm not getting that progress that I had in the beginning. And it's because
Mhm.
the diet, the changing of your food is that progress that you're getting is not the end of the road. That is just
No.
enough to try and motivate you and inspire you to keep
Mhm.
going out and finding more things. What else can I do
Yep.
that might make me feel a little bit better? What else haven't I thought about that might make a change in my life by doing these tiny little things that I do every day, but just
Mhm.
making tweaks here and there? And
Yeah.
that one of these questions that's come up for me, and I love asking myself questions. It's like our boy Tony says, questions are really where everything happens, because we have
Yes.
these beliefs about ourselves. We're telling ourselves things on a daily basis, but we couldn't
Mhm.
get those beliefs without asking a question first. So then
Sure.
it comes to the point of, what are the questions I'm asking myself? And one of the
Mhm.
things I love asking recently is, what else is possible? And
Right.
you get to this point of, okay, I didn't think that I'd be able to lose weight. I didn't think that I'd be able to experience relief from this pain. Whatever that thing is, that you did something and you experienced relief, you experienced progress, you experienced joy, that should be the thing that inspires you to say, what else is possible? What else could I go
Right.
out there and pursue or learn about, or have conversations with people that may make a difference in my life? And then I can start compounding all these things together to create that puzzle, that big picture, like we were talking about, until you understand that it's never just one of these things. And even if you change it once, you change constantly. Your chemical makeup changes, your circumstance changes, your location, your relationships, your health. So you're constantly going to have to be making these modifications and altering things. It's not as though you just change your diet one day, you found something that works, boom, you're done for the rest of your life. It's a
Mhm.
lifelong process of self-discovery and learning that that is self-care. That those questions, that going out there and doing the very difficult work of saying, I don't feel well, but I believe that I can figure out how to feel better, and I'm going to keep going until I do. That's self-care.
Right.
It's not, oh, I'm eating more fruits and vegetables, or I go for a run every morning, or I read a book on the weekends. It's the fact that I understand that I am totally unique, that the only
Mhm.
person who is ever going to be able to understand me is me. So by taking this
Mhm.
time to really get to know myself, I can then understand what I'm good at, where my gifts lie, how I can then go out and serve other people because I've figured
Mhm.
it out. Like you said, I've done that hard work. So now I can expedite the process for someone else so they don't have to feel that pain. And that is where that idea of self-care not being selfish really comes in, because you have taken that time out of your life and said, I'm going to halt everything until I really figure out what is going to make me the best version of myself. So then I can go out and fulfill whatever purpose I have now discovered I've been put here to serve.
Mhm. Yep. And well, it's like Tony says. Find someone who's walked the walk, been where you were and is now where you are. And that's the type of person that can turn decades into days for you. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of my favorite quotes from him. And it's so true. And it doesn't matter whether I don't care if you're going to a doctor, if you're going to see a specialist for some kind of reason, you're going to want to go to somebody who knows the most about that particular subject or that particular thing that you have going on. It's the same thing when it comes to working with a coach on being more mindful, whether, it's working with a coach on nutrition or fitness or whatever it is. These people have the knowledge that you don't. And the only way that you can positively affect change in your life, in my opinion, is through knowledge. It's through learning, whether it's learning about yourself, in my case, it was learning about what nutrition actually does in the body. I just shoved food in my face and I didn't care. If it tasted good, I ate it. And the next thing you know, I'm 42 years old and I weigh 405 pounds. And it's like, you just don't realize. But then when you get to that point to where you start to educate yourself and you start to realize all these different concepts, it really starts to make some connections in a lot of other areas in your life as well. You start to realize that, okay, well, because I didn't know enough about what carbohydrates do in the body, I was overeating them and that caused me to gain weight. You start to realize that, well, you start to realize what stress does to the body, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I need to find ways to reduce stress, because stress elevates cortisol elevates fat storage, and the list goes on. And it's just amazing when people start to draw those correlations and they start to realize what the knowledge that they didn't have, once they start to gather it, it really makes such a change in people's life.
Yeah. And, I totally agree with that. And I also think I've learned something in my own journey and especially recently, whereas yes, it is about going out there and finding those people who have done it and learning from them and accepting that there is always something that you can learn and grow from. But it's also about believing that you do have those answers within you. It's just that you need to figure out how to unlock them. And if you're constantly thinking that everybody else has more knowledge or more experience or has something that you don't, that is that kind of hamster wheel you put yourself on, where you're constantly saying, I need to read more, I need to learn more, I need to talk to more people. And you never get to that point where you really sit still and say, okay, maybe I do have the answers. Maybe I just haven't been looking for them in the right place. And I've assumed they're going to come from somewhere else, rather than if I sit here and I ask myself, what would make me feel better? What would give me more confidence? What would make me think that I am a healthy person that has value? And you can start understanding where those disconnects came from. Why did I treat my body this way? Why wasn't I valuing myself? Why did I think I wasn't important enough to take care of, and that I didn't deserve to be healthy and to feel like I could learn or I could grow or I could thrive? Then that's when you start seeing that these people that you've looked up to and idolized and learned from for so long, it's like Tony Robbins' Netflix special. It says, I am not your guru, and it's this idea of I'm no different than you. He listened to that voice inside of him, regardless of everybody else that was telling him he was crazy, that you can't do it this way, that, you're going to piss people off. And he said, I don't care, because this feels so right. This is who I am. And it would be more painful for me not to live my life this way than it would to experience that, negativity from other people, because people can tell you you're wrong or you're bad or whatever it is that you feel self-conscious about. But it's when you continually repeat it to yourself that you start believing it. And that's where the real damage happens. And that is that idea of like, I have to do more, I have to be more, I have to learn more in order for me to be happy and feel like I'm enough. Whereas if you can reverse engineer that and say, I am 100% whole and enough exactly as I am in this moment. And I don't need to change a single thing about myself to be happy, to be healthy, and to be worthy of love and success. And you actually start believing it, then you get that fire in you that motivates you to go out and learn more and inspire other people and better yourself. And so it's that, I think, is why people experience burnout, because you're constantly going out there. You don't feel like you're doing enough. You aren't being enough. So you have to go do more and be more. And then you get to this point where you're so exhausted, you can't keep going, but you still don't feel fulfilled. Whereas if you can tell yourself and actually, and it doesn't happen right away. It's a long process. It starts with, telling yourself every morning, I am enough. I am healthy. I am happy. I am beautiful, whatever that is that you really want to believe about yourself. And you keep saying it over and over and over until it doesn't feel so foreign, until it gets to that point where you're like, could I believe that about myself? And as soon as you have that moment where it switches from like, there's no way I could believe that's possible, to maybe that could be possible, that's when you want to jump on it and say, I'm going to keep whatever that is. And that's going to be the thing that keeps me going out there to now get those answers of how do I take care of my body, my mind, my spirit, everything all at once, rather than feeling like it's this compartmentalized thing of I've got to learn about diet, I've got to learn about exercise, I've got to learn about mindfulness, I've got to learn about limiting self-beliefs. It's bringing it all in one conversation within yourself, and then letting that be the guide to go out and tell you what is the next right thing for me to do in order to get where I know I can go.
Yeah. It's all self-belief. It's like, it's a short quote, but it's a good one from Henry Ford. It's like, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And that is so powerful when you break it down to what does the brass tacks of what that means. It's all about what you believe, and you can take things from there. And speaking of belief, now one of the things that I noticed in reading the information that you sent me, and as I was preparing for this podcast, one of the things I noticed is that you believe in getting to know yourself every morning, because you're never going to be the same person that you were yesterday. Can you kind of expound on that a little bit for us and let us know what that means to you?
Hey guys, I just wanted to jump in here and make sure that you're enjoying the video. I'm sure you are. And if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell, make sure you select the all feature, so that way you get notified when new episodes of my podcast drop. And if you would, right up here in the top right hand corner of my channel where my links are, there's a Patreon link. If you guys could help out there, it'd grease the wheels to keep this thing moving, and I surely would appreciate it. Now, let's get back into the video.
Yeah, so this is a new practice for me, and it comes from all of the work I had done beforehand. And like we were saying, you do it the hard way for so long, and that is really where coaches come from, and why I got into coaching myself is because I experienced so much pain and so many obstacles, and I felt like I had done it the long, hard way, and I didn't think it was necessary. I wanted to make sure other people didn't have to experience this long, drawn out process. But I found incremental progress and growth and relief through doing certain things. But it wasn't until I really understood that I had no clue who I was at my core. And that was where the real pain and disconnect was coming from. It wasn't from the decisions I was making or the decisions I've made in the past. It was the fact that I woke up one day and essentially realized that I had been hiding from myself because I felt like, again, that I was never enough, that I always had to do more or be more, and that I had to present myself as something other than who I am, because there's no way anyone could possibly accept me with my faults, with my flaws. And I still saw them as faults and flaws instead of seeing them as opportunities or as gifts, because there's something that other people don't have. So I started this whole process of self-discovery, and it really came down to me having this kind of case of imposter syndrome, which a lot of people have, and especially those that are in the self-improvement and health and wellness field, because we feel like, who are we to tell other people what to do if we're not even able to do these things ourselves? Or I have to have a certain level of expertise or knowledge before I'm qualified to be able to go out and help other people. And yet we never feel like we get to that point. So it's always like we're faking it, right? And so I changed the script a little bit and said, what if the only thing I ever tried to be an expert on was myself? And that really changed everything for me, because it took the pressure off me thinking that I had to solve somebody else's problems, or I had to have the right answer of how to heal their pain. And instead I realized the only way I was able to do that for myself was getting to know myself, getting to know who I am instead of who I had let other people think I was, or who I thought I had to be. And as soon as I did that, I really started liking that person, instead of thinking like, why have I been trying to hide this? Or why have I been trying to make this more palatable, or expect myself to be something other than what I am? And as soon as I really got to know the things that I enjoy, the things that make me feel better, and the things that allow me to heal myself, which were the complete opposite of what everybody else told me that I should be doing, that was when I stopped caring so much what other people thought, because I was now experiencing so much joy and pleasure and relief that I realized of course, I've been trying these same things over and over again for years, but I'm not the same person I was in high school, in college, when I got married, all these things, because the only constant, the only thing that is guaranteed is that everything will constantly change. And that includes us. So again, like I said, it's not just about finding that one thing that works for you and then assuming that's going to be the way it is forever. And then again, maybe in a couple months, in a couple years, you get to another point where you experience more pain because that thing's no longer working. And you think, I've got to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. Whereas it's so much easier to do a little bit of work every single day. And so my new kind of I practice, and that is really what I look at, what I do as a practice, because there is no end destination ever, is who am I today? How long do I have available? Do I have 15 minutes? Do I have half an hour? Do I have all day to really sit and figure out who am I? Because I'm not the same person I was yesterday, and I'm not going to be the same person tomorrow. But if I can answer that question, then I know whatever decisions I have to make today are going to be the right ones, because I made them from a place that felt totally aligned with who I am rather than who I thought I had to be.
Yeah. I can't even describe the amount of power that was in that little run there that you were talking. It's just, people don't realize just, we're ever changing, and it breaks down on all levels. Like in my case, when I'm dealing with people with nutrition and fitness, when I start someone on a program, they might be eating 2,300 calories. And they might have a certain amount of proteins, a certain amount of fats, a certain amount of carbohydrates. But as their body changes, so does their need. So you have to adapt. You have to be able to recognize the need for change, and you have to be able to make those changes. It doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't necessarily not working anymore. It's just, it needs to be modified to go along with the changes that are happening within you. And that's whether it's in your mind, in your body, in your relationships with other people, whatever it is, everything changes. You're right. Nothing stays the same. I heard a quote one time that said, a single man never crosses the same river twice. And that's because the man changes, and so does the river. And when you look at the basics of that statement, to me, that's like the basis of life. Life is all about evolution. It's all about, we're born from an embryo. We grow up through our childhood, through our adulthood. We pass what we can on to our children and the world, and then we're gone. And if life itself is all about change, what in the world would make us think that we don't have to be mindful of changes that we need to make as our life progresses?
Yeah. And I think that is, it goes back to the idea for me that everything is also a cycle. It's changing, but it's also secular. And that it is this one thing, especially in yoga, there is a practice of understanding how life mirrors these cycles of whether it be the year, your month, your week, whatever. But if you can think of it in the form of right now, you know, we're going into summer. It's very high energy. There's so much life and vibrancy, and everybody is out wanting to be active and do things and socialize. And especially because we're all stuck inside right now, we're feeling this anxiety and this containment that we're not used to at this time of the year. And so we try to match our energy to that. And if we can't, we feel that disconnect. And then when fall comes around, you know, it's this, we're starting to wind down a little bit. Things are calming down. The energy is a little bit calmer. You're finding a less high intensity exercise and activities and things that are a little bit more restorative. And then you get to winter, which is actually death. And that is in a lot of practices, theologies, religion, there is that idea that we die many times in our lifetime. And winter is kind of that where that is mirrored, because all the trees have, dropped their leaves and everything has gone inside. And there's this feeling of kind of despair and cold. But what's happening is that we are basically shedding that skin of who we were, because spring's coming and there's going to be this emergence of the new life. And it's going to be different than it was, but it's also going to be better than it was. And so if you can mirror in your life those own cycles and recognize that if you're in this period of depression, of not being able to really understand your life or the things that are going on, and you're feeling a lot of pain, that may just be because part of you, that older part of you that no longer feels right, is dying off, because you're making space for this new emergence of who you're about to become. And that is where that beauty and life and color all start to bloom, and you're getting to know yourself all over again. And then especially for women, one of the biggest things that has made a difference in my health and wellness, both mental and physical, is getting to know my own cycle as well as a woman, because we have this every single month where if you're doing these exercise programs and you're following nutrition that's based the same thing every single day, and then you're wondering why it's not working, you're not working with your own natural cycle. So for instance, I used to do all these really high intensity workouts that would say, oh, work out, an hour a day, 30 minutes a day, and take one day a week off. And then I would wonder why I would get to this point where I was like, this is impossible. It's the last thing I want to do. And yes, I did it and I felt a little bit better, but it was still so hard. And I stopped doing that instead. And now what I do is I understand that week where I'm not supposed to be pushing myself. My body is physically getting rid of toxins. It's flushing all of these things out on purpose. And because I'm losing a lot of that energy, I need to restore. I need to take care of myself. I need to rest. And I need to trust that by doing that, when that week is over and I start getting into that spring cycle, I'm going to start ramping up. I'm going to start getting more energy and having more creativity and wanting to socialize more. And then that next week, I'm going to be up here, and that's the get shit done week. That's when you go out there and you do the high intensity workouts and you do all those things that have felt really hard to do, because now they don't feel so hard. You have that energy and you're using your own body clock in a way that's meant to be used, rather than trying to work against it constantly.
Right. So now, one of the things that you had said was that the most profound change that you have had in your health and wellness was learning about the mind-body connection. Now, I know myself, as a personal trainer, the mind-muscle connection, there are numerous studies where people have actually been able to affect change just simply by utilizing the power of their mind. They've actually been able to affect change in size and strength of a muscle and things of that nature. But for overall wellness, how important is the mind-body connection, and what are some of the ways that people can start to tap into that?
It is everything, because once again, it's that it's us compartmentalizing things and trying to separate things that are not meant to be separated, where we really experience that pain and difficulty. And when we can find that harmony in everything in our life, and really that's what holistic means, you know, it's approaching things from its entirety and seeing how interconnected everything is. And what's happened, especially in fitness and health, specifically in traditional medicine as well, we have all these specialists, right, that are saying, oh, if there's something wrong with your brain, you go to a neurosurgeon. If there's something wrong with your spine, you go to an orthopedic surgeon. And yet they're so specialized that when you have all of these, there's so many lifestyle diseases out there. And I suffered from one of them. And it was the reason nobody could diagnose me, because I would go to these specialists and they would say, oh, well, what you're experiencing doesn't fall under my expertise, so there's nothing I can do. Sorry. And yet it took me understanding that I was once again trying to seek different specialties when the issue I was having was with my whole body, mind, soul as an entity. And that was what changed for me. I stumbled upon this book at an estate sale, and it was one of those instances where, you know, my intuition, I wasn't very practiced at listening to it at that time, but there was something that told me I had to go to this estate sale. So I don't ever go to them. I was like, all right, whatever, I got nothing else to do. And I found this box of books, and one of them was called The Mindbody Prescription by Dr. John Sarno. And he is a doctor who in the 80s and 90s was doing all of this work on what he had coined as tension myositis syndrome at the time. He then renamed it to tension myoneural syndrome. And it was his hypothesis was that these lifestyle diseases, and even some of the more progressive ones like MS and cancer and diabetes, that they're actually stemming from repressed trauma or emotions. And our subconscious has decided that that is too painful to explore. And oftentimes that's why trauma, we're not even aware that it exists. And so when people say like, oh, do you have any past trauma? Has something happened to you? And you're like, no, because your subconscious has blocked out that entire period of your life. And so he was saying, because that's happening, that is too painful for us to explore. Our body is creating physical pain where it's saying, nope, that's too much. Don't want to go there. So look over here instead. And so that what we say, you know, pain is a signal, but we're assuming that signal is coming from the place where the root cause is. So if you have pain in your neck, you're going to go and try and figure out how to relieve the pain in your neck, rather than thinking, my brain, you can't experience pain in your body. You can't feel sensation without your brain creating it first. And we know that. So if you can ask yourself, I feel physical pain, but I know that my brain is the one creating it. So what thoughts, what emotions have I been feeling that might trigger that physical pain in my body? And also, if you can tell yourself, you're like telling your brain, like, I caught you. I know what you're doing. I'll get it still. You know, I don't experience much pain anymore, but there'll be days where I'll feel myself kind of grabbing my neck. It feels really stiff, or I'll say, you know, I've got a headache. And I'm instantly able to say, okay, brain, I caught you. Like, what thought are you creating? What am I trying to avoid right now that it feels like physical pain would be easier than whatever mental or emotional pain I'm going to need to explore in order to make this feel better. And so that is really where the mind-body connection comes in, is understanding you can't have pain in one area without it stemming from somewhere else. And I would definitely encourage people, if this resonates at all, if they're curious about it at all, and there's a documentary on Netflix called Heal, and I watched it recently, and it was one of those things where in the credits, I like scattered and I was like, oh gosh. And I could just feel, I was like, I think my life is about to change. And my husband even grabbed a box of tissues. Like, I think you're going to need these. And it was because it was this total reflection of everything that I figured out on my own, now coming from these people that are absolute experts in their field. but
Yeah.
have been kind of cast off for a long time because it's been woo-woo, or it's been, you know, too touchy-feely, and no way can emotions or thoughts impact physical manifestation in your body. But really nothing exists without thoughts and emotions. Like even what you see outside, that's somebody else sees it entirely differently. So it's truly understanding that connection and how those two things work together. And then, like we were talking about before, really getting to know how much control you actually have over being able to change those thoughts and those programs that you didn't know existed, to finally get that physical relief, but also free yourself from this prison you've been living in that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah. And when you sit back and you look at some of the cases where people have suffered for years from diseases, and the diseases were all brought about from their own mind, from the fact that they thought that there was something wrong. The brain, what the brain does, the brain reacts and sends inflammation to a particular area. Inflammation causes disease. That's been proven time and time again. You know, if you can reduce the amount of inflammation in your body, you reduce the amount of disease, plain and simple. So you have all these people that have sat around, you know, like the old, what do they used to call people hypochondriacs all the time. They always thought something was wrong with them. And more often than not, they actually did have things wrong with them. And it was because they constantly believed that something was wrong. And by that same token, you can strictly, by the power of your mind, you know, there have been cases where people have cured themselves of all different types of ailments simply because they willed it with the power of their mind. They said, you know what, I don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't
and
have
that's
that problem
exactly
anymore,
what I
it goes
did.
away.
And it's crazy to think of. And you like, you want to, you know, I've been on the other side of it where, you know, you hear that and you're like, oh, must be nice to really think that that's possible. You know, there's all these communities online where people are saying like, oh, just stop feeling that way. Thanks, I'm cured. You don't understand me.
Yeah.
That's not what you're saying. And I think that's the problem. And I experienced it so much when I would go to these professionals, that because it sounds like they're accusing you, like they're saying you're doing this to yourself and you can stop it at any time. And that's not what it is. You're not creating this because you want to be in pain. Your brain has created it, and you don't have control over that part of your brain because you've never tried to understand it. And so that is really where that comes in, is really understanding what the brain does, its function, but also how you have way more control over it than you ever thought possible. And to your point with inflammation in general, that's actually one of the things that's addressed and that Dr. Sarno really did, was understanding inflammation is the constriction. You know, you're not getting oxygen to a certain part of your body. And so, but nobody really gets that. So when things get inflamed, you're thinking, oh, I've got to get this topical ointment, or I've got to put a heating pad or cold on it, or I've got to change my diet. But that's not what's actually causing it. It's a lack of oxygen to that point of your body. And that's why in yoga and mindfulness, there's something called pranayama, and that is basically breath practice. It's understanding how our breath is able to affect certain physiology in our body, including our brain. And so if your brain has decided to stop sending oxygen to that part of your body, you can actually intentionally focus on doing nothing other than sending oxygen to that part of your body. And you're going to end up feeling a lot more relief than you would if you're popping pills or you're putting something topically on that, because again, that's not addressing the root cause of it. And in that Heal documentary, one of the things they talk about, Deepak Chopra, who is one of my favorite people, he says, when you go to these doctors, accept the diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't accept the prognosis. Meaning if somebody tells you this is your ailment and this is what's happening in your body, they're a medical professional. They understand the body. That doesn't mean they get to decide how you heal from this, or how long you're going to live with this, or what your life is going to be like because of it. You get to decide that. So you can then take that information and now you figure out, cool, I'm now armed with even more information and knowledge than I had before, but that doesn't mean it has to limit me. If anything, it's going to project me farther towards that healing, because now I know more about myself than I did when I came in here.
Yep. Absolutely. And I want to go back and touch for just a second because you were talking about breath and how you can actually change your physiology. I believe it was Aubrey Marcus in his book, Own the Day, Own Your Life. He talked about some research that was done over in China where you can take 6 deep breaths just by taking 6 deep breaths. And it's not 5, it's not 4, it's 6 deep breaths. And you can lower your level of stress. You can lower your blood pressure just by stopping and taking 6 deep breaths. That's all you have to do. So when you sit back and you think about something so simple as taking 30 seconds to take 6 deep breaths and how it can affect change, why would you not want to learn more about how different things that you do throughout your day affect your health and well-being? I mean, why would you not want to learn more? I'm like obsessed. I'm forever learning anything and everything I can. I'm a nutritionist by trade, but trust me when I tell you, like I'm learning everything about yoga and all these different mindful practices and all this different stuff because it absolutely fascinates me. I deal with the human body, and because I deal with the human body, I have to understand all these other concepts as well.
Yes. And that, I think, even that little thing, with the 6 deep breaths, that is just one instance of what breath practice really is, which is simply bringing your attention to what's going on in your body. We go on with our lives every single day. We've got so many things that distract us, all these responsibilities we have, these pressures, this motivation to succeed. And we separate ourselves from what we really are. And it's almost, I had a really difficult time actually visualizing my body because you identify with it so much that you're not thinking. When you're inhaling, there is an entire process that is going on in your body. Are you aware of it? Can you feel it? Do you really feel your lungs expanding as they fill with air? Can you feel where that breath is hitting you? And then do you understand that when you're exhaling, you're actually releasing toxins from your body? That is what, we all understand that, we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants have the opposite effect. So we're constantly feeding each other. But have you really thought about what that means? That oxygen is this thing that is absolutely clearing out the things that you continue to put into your body, whether it be poor food choices or stress or physical ailments, and then releasing it with that exhale. And so that's what meditation really is. Again, it's not getting your brain to shut off. It's not stopping those thoughts. It's allowing you, for maybe the first time in your life, to understand there's so many things that your body does that are miraculous that you take for granted and you don't understand. And then you wonder why you don't understand the problems that you have. Because if you can really think of it, so breath, for instance, I won't go too deeply into it because it's a whole nother podcast, but we, in yoga and in a lot of other disciplines, they focus on chakras that we have, which are simply energy points in your body. And they all relate to different elements, as well as different struggles you might have and how you can heal them. But the heart chakra, which is right in the center of your chest, the element is air. And the way that you can really manipulate this chakra is through breath, because that's air. But it's also, when you think about it, where your lungs are. And we don't think about, our lungs are in our back. They're in the back of your body. And so when you're inhaling, you're filling this space where your heart is and your lungs are. But a lot of times that's where it stops. It's this very shallow breath. We're breathing in and out and we're letting it get here because that's where your lungs are. And that's it. Whereas if you watch a baby when they're breathing, their stomach rises and falls, because when we're born, that normal breath process, it's going all the way in down to your stomach, because you have a whole body that requires oxygen and the blood flow and circulation. And so if you're really in this state of calm and being at ease, it's going to go to all of those places it needs to feed. Whereas if you're in a stressful kind of, we live in this state where we're very up here, and that breath never gets to all of those places. So the breath practice is really all it is getting your focus to understand that you are a human being with a body with these kind of both chemical and physiological things that are going on. And you can actually control some of them. And that's really, really cool when you start getting into it. And so, like you said, it's like you learn about these things, and that's all it takes. Just find one little nugget of something you're like, that sounds kind of interesting. Maybe I'll try and learn more about that and see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, great. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave it. But don't be scared of something just because it seems different or because it seems overwhelming. That may be the thing that opens that whole new world of possibility where you're just, like you said, now you just are so curious and you want to feed everything because you're like, well, I've already seen how exciting and how much change I can enact by learning about this. Where else can I go learn about stuff? What else could I possibly make my life, exponentially better than I ever thought possible?
Yeah. I mean, I had one of those moments myself in my journey. It's like, as I initially lost a bunch of weight simply by diet change. But when I started to get into exercise and bodybuilding and stuff like that, it was all because I read a study that talked about how the more lean muscle tissue a person has, the better their body is at burning the fuel that they put in it, particularly carbohydrates. And that lit a fire under me. I was like, okay, I need to learn everything that I can learn about putting on muscle mass. And then I started eating like a bodybuilder and training like a bodybuilder. And it was within less than a year, I was off all my diabetic medicine. My doctor was like, you need to speak to people that we work with, because we don't see people in their mid 40s do this type of stuff. Normally, when you're in your 40s and you get a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, if you can reverse it, it's a very, very slow process because people don't have the motivation, it seems, as they're older. They just kind of accept their fate, so to speak. But I didn't. I mean, it was like I found that little nugget and I ran with it, and I've been going crazy ever since. So
and that is the key right there, that belief that because somebody else might have heard that thing and heard, oh, well, I don't have lean muscle tissue, so that means that I can't be healthy, where you heard it and you believed, oh, that might be something, I think I could do that. And so again, you had a totally different approach to it, and whatever that voice was that was telling you, this is something that I need to explore, I don't know why, but this feels like an avenue I want to go down, and you had the courage to follow it with no evidence that it was going to lead you where you wanted to go, you were instantly rewarded. And that's really what it is. It's believing that you can do it without having any evidence to prove that you can.
Yeah. The bottom line is, what did I have to lose? I really didn't have anything to lose. The only thing, because in order to do what I wanted to do, I had to exercise. So that's just how it worked out. So now let me ask you, because I want to ask you one final question before I let you go. Because you are so well versed in so many different things, and there's so much more stuff that I want to talk to you about. We're probably going to have to do another episode at some point. But if you could give all my listeners three quick tips to help them try to improve either their mind-body connection, or just to be more mindful about, the things that go on throughout their bodies, what would they be?
Yeah. So one, I would say, stop trying to do more. That has been the number one thing for me, that we constantly think there's more that I need to go out there and do. There's more that I need to go out there and learn, until you really realize that you are entirely enough and whole and complete. Exactly. You're exactly as you're supposed to be right now. And so for me, it's stopping these things that, we always say, oh, I don't have enough time. And that's not true. We have nothing but time. It's how you choose to spend your time that is going to make those decisions. So instead of constantly trying to fill your calendar and do more, try and understand who you are, and then trust that from that place, you will know what the next right thing to do is. But if you're constantly going around and distracted, and you can't even hear that voice that's been telling you the whole time, like you're not supposed to be doing this, that anxiety that you're feeling is because you're not supposed to do this. I think is where you get kind of lost. So stop doing things. And that doesn't mean, sit and be lazy and do nothing, because again, we have this, I think, preconceived notion that if we're being still, we're not contributing. It just means stop until you know what the right thing to do is, and you will. And then another thing I would say is to try and separate yourself from your ego. And we all identify with these beliefs that we have, the things that we like to do, the people that we live with, the area that we live with, our cultures, our identities. And so as soon as you identify with those things, you're now creating a truth in yourself. But there's a big difference between the truth and belief. So as soon as you can start questioning these things that you believe to be true, then that's when you can start playing with new things that may not have seemed possible to begin with, and where imagination really comes into play, because now it's not that, oh, that would be a great, but that's not an option for me. Everything is an option. So really get started figuring out what those questions are that you're asking yourself, and then seeing maybe if there's a better question to ask that may help you dismantle what you already believe about yourself. And move you forward. And then lastly, meditation and mindfulness and just a practice of yourself does not have to be any certain thing. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be a certain diet. Find something you already enjoy doing, and then allow yourself to be totally present with that thing with no distractions, where the only thing you're focused on is that experience, and noticing while you're there, what thoughts are popping up? Am I noticing my breath? Am I thinking about my schedule or all the things I have to do? Can I be totally present with this thing? Because what happens is we try and fast forward our life to get to the good parts, and then we just kind of stomach all the things in between. But really, it's all good. Like, everything is a good part. So when you're in that moment of feeling stressed and like, oh God, I don't want to do this, a question I like to ask myself is, what if this is the entire point? What if I'm supposed to learn how to do these mundane things and daily tasks with joy and with presence? And that will then allow me to realize that our life isn't just these events and special things that happen every once in a while. All we ever have is this moment right now. There's no such thing as the past. There's no such thing as the future. We know we can't hold them, but right now you have this moment. So how can you enjoy it? And if you get good at that practice, how can I enjoy right now? How can I be grateful for what I have at this exact moment? Then you'll start to realize that you've always had everything you've ever needed. And one of my favorite sayings is that we'll never get what we want until we start wanting what we already have. And I think that is the real practice.
Yep. That's awesome. You know, I'm a firm believer in absolutely everything that happens to us throughout our lives happens for a reason. It may be a good reason, it may be a bad reason, but it happens for a reason. And for us to truly understand what our life is supposed to be about and what it can be, we have to try to dig deep into some of those reasons and try to figure out why certain things happened. And don't always look at it, well, that's just my luck. No, it may not be just your luck. It may be something else. So take the time to learn those things about yourself, and you're going to be a better person for it. Anna, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been absolutely amazing. We're definitely going to get together and do another episode, because there's a whole list of stuff that I want to talk to you about that we haven't even touched on yet.
Well, I had a blast, and I think I could talk to you forever. So we'll definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely. Before we go, real quick, let everybody know where they can connect with you if they want to work with you, if they want to follow you on social media or whatever. Let them know.
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is probably my website, and maybe you can put that in the show notes, because my name is Anna Nyeste. Yeah, so it's AnnaNyeste.com. It's not at all spelled like it sounds. But I'm on Instagram, Anna Q Nyeste, same handle on Twitter. My website is definitely the best way to get in touch with me. And I also offer a free first session for anybody that may be interested in learning about what I do as a self-care coach, and how they can get to know themselves better and start healing from whatever pain they have. So if it's an avenue that they may be interested in exploring or learning more about, definitely check out my website, and you can book a free session directly from there. But otherwise, just reach out to me and get in touch. I love having conversations like this with people, because I always learn just as much from whoever I'm talking to. to as I hope they do from me. And I think the more that we all continue to have these conversations, the better off we're going to be, especially right now with all of this kind of change and newness. It can be to have someone that can help you be excited about that, I think makes a big difference. And I think that's what you're doing as well, is just helping people think about things differently.
Thank you. Thank you. I sure hope so anyway. All right, my dear, I'm going to let you go. Let me pop up and wrap this video up real quick, and I'll be right back and we'll have some parting words.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys. Anna is absolutely amazing. You could probably get used to seeing her at least once or twice more on the show. She's just an amazing person. I love her mindset. I love the way that she looks at things, and I'm sure that she's got a whole lot more value that I want to share with all you guys. So in the meantime, do me a favor, share this podcast to everybody you know, because I'm doing my best to try to bring together people that are going to provide the most value for you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. You guys know the deal. And until I see you next time, my motto, as always, playtime's over. It's time to go to work.